Welcome to the Explainer. Today, we're going to break down the absolute core cycle of test management, a huge concept from the ISTQB Advanced Level syllabus. Seriously, this is the essential loop every test manager has got to master to navigate their projects to success.
Okay, let's get real for a second. Have you ever felt like your test project is a ship caught in a storm? You've got no map and the compass is just spinning wildly? Yeah, that feeling of chaos is super common. But what if you had a reliable navigation system?
Well, that's exactly what we're building today. A navigation system to turn that chaos into control. And it's all built on three interconnected activities: planning, monitoring, and controlling.
So, first up, planning. Think of this as charting the course for our journey. This is where we create the map, we figure out the whole itinerary, and we define exactly where we're going and how we think we're going to get there.
Now here is the most crucial insight, and if you remember one thing about planning, make it this. It is not a one-and-done event. The syllabus really hammers this home. It's a continuous process. It starts early for sure, but you are constantly updating and replanning as the project moves and you get new information.
And just look at everything that falls under planning. It's so much more than just making a schedule. It's about defining the why, the objectives. It's about looking for trouble before it starts with risk analysis. It's figuring out the how, the approach, the resources, the schedule. And then, the critical last piece, getting everybody to actually agree on the plan.
Okay, so we've charted our course. We have a map. But a map is pretty useless if you don't actually look down to see where you are, right? We need to constantly check our position and keep an eye on the radar for storms. This brings us to our second pillar, monitoring.
Think of this as being in the ship's command center. You're constantly checking the dashboard, looking at the GPS, and watching that weather radar. Monitoring is all about collecting the data, the metrics, that tell you if you're on course, if you're on time, and if there's any trouble up ahead. And of course, your dashboard is going to look different depending on the kind of ship you're sailing. With a traditional, sequential model, you're looking at periodic snapshots, milestone reports. But in an agile model, you need a live feed. You need those real-time dashboards tracking things like team velocity and burn-down charts so you know how much work is really left. But no matter what model you're using, these are the critical gauges you'll always be watching. How many tests have we run? How quickly are we finding and fixing bugs? Are we covering all the requirements? What's our team's pace? These metrics are the vital signs of your entire testing effort.
Now, seeing a flashing red light on the dashboard, that's one thing. Actually grabbing the wheel and correcting your course, that is something else entirely. And that proactive response is the very essence of our third activity, test control.
This is where you, as the test manager, are actively steering the ship. You take the data from your monitoring and you make decisions. You make those course corrections to get around obstacles or just to get back on track. It's all about dynamic, responsive management.
And this control process follows a really clear, logical loop. First, you detect a problem. That's your trigger. Maybe defect fix rates are way too slow. Second, you analyze the root cause. What's going on here? Third, you act. You reprioritize tests, you allocate more resources, whatever it takes. And finally, you update your original map to reflect the new reality.
All right, this all sounds great in theory. I know. But let's see how this entire plan, monitor, control cycle comes together in a very real-world artifact that I bet you use every single day. Let's ground all this in a perfect example, the standard defect workflow. This process, which tracks a bug from the moment it's found to the moment it's closed, is a perfect miniature version of the entire cycle in action. Let's break this down.
To think about it, the defined workflow itself, the states like open, in progress, resolved, closed, that is your plan. The active tracking which defects are in which state, that is your monitoring. And finally, every single decision to move a defect from one state to another, like when a developer fixes it or a manager decides to reject it, that is an active control. Plan, monitor, and control, all right there in one simple workflow.
This leads to a really crucial question, though. You're doing all this planning, monitoring, and controlling, but how do you know if it's actually working? How can you evaluate the effectiveness of your own process?
Well, here's a powerful success checklist you can use. At the end of a project, ask yourself these questions, and if you can confidently answer yes to them, that's a really strong sign that your risk-based testing and your control activities are truly effective. It proves you're finding the important stuff early and making smart choices along the way.
You know, as many people preparing for the exam have pointed out, the advanced level is a noticeable step up. But mastering this dynamic cycle of planning, monitoring, and control isn't just about passing an exam. It's the fundamental skill for a successful career in test management.
So I'll leave you with this final thought. Take a look at your own test process. Is it just a rigid checklist that you follow blindly? Or is it a responsive, dynamic compass? Because ultimately, the goal isn't just to follow a plan. It's to build an intelligent, adaptive system that can guide your project safely and successfully to its destination, no matter what storms you encounter along the way.